If you ran a shop that supported makers to create more sustainably, what would it look like? And what would you stock? Bevan O'Daly is the owner of Glasgow-based Bawn Textiles, and her goal is to provide responsibly sourced fabric, yarn and haberdashery for ethically minded makers. In this episode, Bevan tells us about the criteria for the items she stocks, why she sometimes talks customers out of purchasing, and the ingenious solution she's devised to help makers pass on their unwanted mates. So stick around a few minutes and we'll hear all about that. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. And I really hope you'll join me in this journey. How are you doing today? Thanks for choosing to have Bevan and myself accompany you with whatever you're up to at the moment. And I'm sure it hasn't escaped your attention that Halloween is very close. So whether or not you participate personally or do some kind of weird mental gymnastics like I do, trying to ignore it for yourself whilst simultaneously helping your kids to participate if you have them, it's pretty close. If you are willfully or reluctantly engaging, I'd love to encourage you to think about it in advance if possible and plan how you can avoid buying lots of new plastic covered stuff and costumes and decorations that are virtually disposable. I'm the first to acknowledge that everyone is busy and we don't all have spare evenings to lovingly craft costumes and decorations out of what we have around us. But there is so much we can achieve with not very much time or effort required by repurposing existing things or sourcing stuff secondhand. I shoved a ton of ideas into episode 108, which was a more sustainable Halloween. So if you need some tactics to help you approach Halloween more sustainably this year, give episode 108 a listen after this one. So my related sustainability win this week is that I uncovered a couple of costumes that my kids wore for Halloween in previous years and I listed them on the Olio app, which is a sharing app where you can post things to give away. So hopefully some other kids will get some use and enjoyment from them. I got both of these costumes from charity shops in the first place. So far my son's zombie costume has been collected just moments ago, but my daughter's Uma from Descendants costume hasn't been requested yet. If it doesn't get requested in the next couple of days, I'll try listing it on Facebook Marketplace or I'll give it to a charity shop. So my sustainability fail for the week is about a decision that I've made, but it might be viewed as more of a compromise than a full-on fail. So you might think this is a bit controversial, that I see this as some kind of fail at all, but this is about me and my family. Anyway, as I've mentioned before, I have been avoiding any participation in trick-or-treating. It's not only about all the unnecessary sweets that are all covered in plastic and the synthetic costumes that are most likely going to head to landfill and all the fake synthetic spider webs and everything. But personally, especially here in the UK, I've seen how trick-or-treating has really brought out a lot of nasty attributes, a lot of greed and other things in people, and I've just tended to abstain. To be clear, I do allow my kids to go to the parties and to the Halloween disco at their school, so it's not like they don't get to participate at all. It's just we've steered clear of the bit where you go around the streets knocking on people's doors. Anyway, this year some friends of ours are hosting a little trick-or-treat session around their neighbourhood and my daughter wants to go. And this year I've decided I'm going to let her go. It's her last year of being in primary school and I'm feeling a bit sentimental about how she's starting to transition out of childhood and into adolescence and I just don't want her to miss out this year. So that's my compromise/fail/sentimental mum moment for the week. Anyway, massive thanks this week to new patrons Annie and Mary for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon this week. And big thanks to existing patrons Linda, Ruth and Meg for choosing to up the amount of their support. I am beyond grateful to all of you. It might sound like the podcast is always racking up new patrons, But I must explain, there really is a turnover with people having to cancel their support sometimes, usually for financial reasons. So if you were thinking about becoming a patron of Check Your Thread, please know it would really help us to cover the costs of making the podcast. So to find out more about the community of patrons that you'd be joining, please head over to patreon.com/checkyourthread, or by clicking on the link that you should see in the episode description in your podcast app right now. So thank you for considering doing so. Right, so today's podcast episode, my chat with Bevan, as you'll hear, came off the back of the episode I made called No Small Business on a Dead Planet, which was episode 143. You don't need to have heard that one to thoroughly enjoy this conversation. But if you haven't heard it, I do hope you'll go back and listen to No Small Business on a Dead Planet, because I think it's one of the most important episodes I've made. It's also one of the ones that's garnered the most feedback. In that episode, I was exploring the many factors that make life tricky for small business owners. And it was so interesting to hear about Bevan's experiences of these issues, like in real life. She was so incredibly open and generous with her information and with her time, which is why it is being brought to you in 2 parts. So you'll hear the rest of this conversation next week. So until then, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. If you're in the US, please, for the love of God, go out and vote and enjoy.
Right, pull my chair in.
Who's your fluffy thing on top of your fridge?
Oh, my fluff. She's not even mine, so we're looking after her for a friend of a friend. Her name is Nydia, and she's getting used to us. She likes me more than she likes my partner Mark. But my partner Mark is really obsessed with her.
Oh, that's so funny.
But he's a bit heavy-handed, so she's just like, who is this massive giant?
Nice. My cat's a git and it's just wandered out. So, well, beyond cat chat, thank you so much for giving me some of your time, because as a small business owner, I know that you must have a million tasks on the go and wearing a million hats. And so thank you so much for giving me some of your time today.
It's great. It's a nice thing to do on a Monday morning, actually.
Good. Is your shop not open on a Monday?
No, only Thursday to Sunday. So it's
Nice.
quite nice to kind of have some downtime. But I also work in other textile conservation work freelance. So that's my other hat.
Oh, okay. I'm going to put a pin in that. Hopefully we'll have time to explore that, because that sounds very exciting as well. Amazing. Okay, so can we start? Would you mind telling us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Yes, so my name is Bevan O'Daly. I'm from Dublin, and I moved to Glasgow in 2015 to study textile conservation, but I stayed. What fills my days? Mondays are generally my day off, which is lovely. And Tuesday, Wednesdays, I kind of stay freelancey for textile conservation things. And then Thursday to Sunday, I'm in the shop, and it's my favourite end of the week. It's lovely.
Oh, nice. That's a really interesting balance.
Yeah, sometimes it's a lot because it sounds like 6 days. And of course, when you've got one day off to manage 2 businesses, you end up working on your day off. But my partner's a chef, so he also doesn't have a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job. So it actually works really well for us because we can have a midweek day off together and do something nice when everyone else is, in work. What we feel
Absolutely.
Everyone else in the world is working but us. So yeah, it's quite nice. It's a nice balance. But so the shop is in the south side of Glasgow. So you've kind of got, Glaswegians will hate me for saying this, but I feel like you've got 3 main pockets. So you've got the West End, the city centre, and the south side, and the shop is in the south side, which was recently voted one of the coolest places in the world, which really showed last weekend. The footfall was amazing. Irregularly very good. But I think that's post people figuring out that it's the coolest place in the world, or one of.
Everyone, don't ruin it now.
I know, yeah. Oh, we've been found out. But yeah, so it's a really nice part of the city where there's lots of other independent shops and businesses and charitable organisations that are doing really good stuff. So yeah, I'm in a really nice community pocket of businesses, but also residents who really support the local businesses. So it's a perfect spot. And I've been there, I think 3 and a bit years I've been in the shop premises. The business itself is 4 years old, but when I got the premises, it was just like perfection on a platter.
Oh, wow.
The building itself wasn't perfection; it had loads of work to do, but the location was excellent because it was still kind of up and coming, and now it feels like it's really found its feet.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so good. Your business has been on my radar for ages, I think partly because of your gorgeous aesthetics that come through on your
Thanks.
online presence, but also because you do have ethics and sustainability kind of at the forefront of what you do. And I was really hoping that I would be able to make it up there and come and visit in person, but that's not happened this year. So I'm hoping maybe next year.
Make a nice weekend trip.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'd love to. The reason why we struck up a communication was because I made a post about my episode, No Small Business on a Dead Planet, and
Yeah.
you commented on that, and then you kindly agreed to talk. So I'm super
Yeah.
excited.
It was a really punchy, like it's so true. And yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to hear your take on things because obviously I'm not a small business owner in the sense of I don't create products and services in that way. I'm more of a content creator, so I would love to hear your thoughts on all that. But we'll break it all down. So I have so many things I want to talk to you about. So I put it to the lovely Check Your Thread Patreon community because they are all much more clever than me.
Oh, great.
And they came up with so many amazing questions for you and things that they wanted to hear your take on. So
Great.
a lot of this is coming from them. So I have to thank the patrons.
Brilliant.
They're an amazing hive mind. You have lots of fans.
Oh, that's nice.
So let's start the basics. Like, do you have like a goal or a mission like behind your business? And over that 3.5 years or 4 years, like, has it shifted at all?
So going back to the very basics of why I started the shop was essentially I just saw a pretty good gap in the market, if for a want of a better description, in Glasgow, where I couldn't find any fabrics that I wanted to buy, and I like to buy in person. And most people like to buy. It's hard to buy fabrics online. We all know that. There is a couple of places in Glasgow, but they're just not really my cup of tea. And I think the kind of lack of ethical sourcing kind of wasn't really, yeah, I just wasn't happy to kind of part with my money for the fact that I didn't know what I was buying. You buy food and you know all the ingredients, and you can't do that with fabrics often. So I was like, no, you're all right. So I was working full time as a textile conservator, and it's a great job, but I really needed that kind of extra, like not so much a side hustle, but I needed to kind of change my career focus to bring in some more creativity into my life. Conservation is amazingly cool, but it's very by the book. It's quite scientific, and I really just I wanted a bit more community focus as well, like a bit more like you're kind of tucked away in a room to just stitch in the behind the scenes of a museum, and it just you weren't engaging in very many people. So I like people, so that was the kind of start of, well, why don't I try and do exactly what I want to do?
It's very bold.
Well, I think even like my partner turns around, he's like, Bev, you've got a shop, and I was like, yeah, I know. Like it's weird because I don't know where my head was at, because I think if I decided now to do it, I'm not sure if I would in the current climate, because I'd already decided to do it just before, like the year before COVID. And it was actually COVID that gave me the time and resources, because loads of stuff went online, talks and big trade shows went online, things that I couldn't get to in person. I took a leap that I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to take had I been working full time.
Right.
So it was a blessing in disguise for me.
So would you say it's harder now for small business owners than it was 4 years ago?
I think a lot has changed. They all say Instagram isn't what it was as well. But I think I started I opened the business in August 2020 when we were still all kind of tucked away at home and people had disposable income, people had time to craft. So it was almost like a false sense of security.
Right, yeah.
In it, and I do recognize that. I think the business kind of catapulted in the first couple of months to the point where I just started with 20 fabrics and a bit of haberdashery online, but with a really lovely following that was supporting the kind of ethical choices I was making. So that was August. And then by November, I had essentially signed or agreed a premises contract to be open by the next, well, to get the keys by the next April. So it was a big, in the space of 6 months, I had made two massive risks.
How did that feel?
Really scary. But you just kind of had to pretend that the world wasn't falling apart. Kind of like we have to do now. We kind of just have to put your best foot forward, try and stay positive, because the world around us is, yeah, excuse my French, a shit show. It's difficult to stay positive, and it's difficult to kind of be promoting, non-essential things. So that's like that catch-22 of my ethics. It's very hard to explain, but I often question myself whether I should have this business, because it is more, it is still leaning into consumer culture. It's, should we be buying anything at all? I'm kind of a minimalist at heart and in practice, but then you kind of have to, I'm trying to earn a living, and I'm trying to provide something good, or better at least. So it is, I'm always arguing with myself.
Yeah, but in essence, like, humans are makers, aren't they? Like, we are
Yeah,
makers. Not everybody's a maker, but many of us have this drive to make, and it is part of us, and it has so many positive, like, mental health benefits and everything
absolutely.
else. And the fact that your business is trying to help us do that more sustainably and more ethically.
Yeah.
So, we can't all just only buy food.
No, absolutely. And I will put my hands up and say I quite often, have regular customers who just love the shop, and they're coming in, you're like, oh, what can I buy next? And I sometimes talk them out of buying things, because I'm like, you don't need this. You have that book. You can work from that one.
Oh,
Or like,
interesting.
you were in here 2 weeks ago, but you haven't done that project. So I wouldn't say I'm anti-stash, but I try not to encourage people to just keep adding to their pile.
Right.
I do try and encourage you, like, oh, well, you should finish that and then come back to me. Or somebody came in kind of last minute yesterday to buy linen for a quilt, as she's going to, dip her toes into quilt making. I was like, you don't want to rush this decision. Like, yesterday was a really quiet day in comparison to Saturday, which was bonkers. So I was like, oh, I could have really done with a nice big sale yesterday. But I talked to her. I was like, go home with samples, play around with these, and come back to me, because I don't want you to make kind of big expensive decisions on a whim without really. So I do encourage people to come in, take it all in, go and think about it, come back, try a few things, take some samples, just so that they really know what they're committing to,
Yeah.
and then they commit to it.
Yeah. But they're going to be happier with their purchase in the longer
Yeah,
term. And you will have built some additional trust and
totally.
a stronger relationship with them. So when they are then looking in the future for things, they'll be like, oh, I know, I can go and chat to Bevan.
Yeah.
I know she's got my back. She's not going to sell me something that isn't suitable.
Yeah. Or people just come in for advice.
So what would you say then was the underlying goal or mission, and is that still the same?
The goal and mission is definitely the same. It is to provide more traceable, ethical fabrics for customers to use and create with. And that hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed in the development of the shop is that we joined the Race to Net Zero pledge.
Oh, cool.
So earlier this year, I was offered funding to have like a member of staff for 16 hours a week, Samia. She was excellent. It was through the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce and
Oh,
this Glasgow
interesting.
City Council. So Samia applied to be a net zero coordinator. So she went and did all this training to figure out how small businesses can make positive changes to kind of reduce their carbon emissions. So we had weekly meetings. And we were doing all kind of data capture and basically finding the shop's baseline of where the shop sits in terms of its carbon emissions for scope 1, 2 and 3. And it is complicated. I still am getting my head around what each of the scopes really, really mean. But that's the main thing that myself and Samia, kind of work towards this year. And Samia is no longer working on the project, but what we achieved in 6 months is what I can then keep track of. So I could keep, like, I weigh all our waste, so our general waste and our recycling, so that in 2 or 3 years I can see hopefully the waste going down, and it's engaging with suppliers about waste. Like, some of my suppliers, like, send me a really big box with only two things in it, and then they just pack it with all their waste as a filler.
Right.
And you're like, oh, so I see how you're getting rid of your waste, but you're just loading it onto me. So it's having those kind of conversations with suppliers to be like, can we do better here? And like, none of this is breakable. Like, it's not.
Yeah, if the fabric ships around a bit.
Yeah, it's not pottery. Like, and just encouraging, like, really simple things of encouraging people to bring their own tote bags. Like, it's just so basic, but also
Yeah.
our heating system, like, the shop is really cold, so we're looking into like draft proofing and whether I can get funding for double glazing, and then so just as of the end of this month, the energy supplier, we're going 100% renewable, and that'll knock down. So we're well on our way to net zero before the target, should we say. But then It's such a tiny business. So if you think that the kind of issue that I have with it, that I can't fully wrap my head around, is that like Bawn is such a tiny business. So it's a micro business essentially. Bawn's carbon footprint is absolutely minuscule, even compared to a business that, has 4 employees, that needs 4 employees to run. So I think Bawn Textiles can very easily achieve net zero in comparison to another small business, because the business was started with an ethical approach. So all the packaging is recyclable from the get-go.
Yeah.
So we're not having to change we're not shifting very much. So actually,
in a sense, that's a bit frustrating, isn't it? Because you can't be like, we've gone from here to here.
Yeah, and I was like, there's no more we can do. So it's like, oh, you reduce your emissions by like 95%, and I was like, well, it was already at like 3. Like, it's so.
But it's still a really worthwhile thing to do, especially if you're talking about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a really good exercise that I'd really encourage any small business or big business to make small changes and see where that kind of sits. My next kind of maybe next year's goal is to kind of go. I've kind of started, but it takes a good chunk of time, especially if it's on my own. But to go down and investigate the B Corp certification. So that's kind of in the future. I'd like to kind of tackle that. So
let's talk about your products. So what criteria do you have for the products that you stock? And what does like ethical and sustainable mean to you in this sense?
So there's a few things. I think the easiest thing that I look out for, just because it's a really easy thing for me to look out for, is whether the product or the fabric in particular is certified by a textile standard, and it's also understanding those standards. So I generally very much trust the Global Organic Textile Standards, that's GOTS for short, and kind of anything from the Soil Association or the Better Cotton Initiative, which is also, it's a step forward. I tend to not really rate, and people will question me for this, but I would encourage people to really look into it. But the OECO-TEX standard, there's loads of standards, and most fabrics are standard 100, which tests the fabric for harmful chemicals and things after the fabric is made. So it has nothing to do with the process of the fibres. It has nothing to do with how the seed was sourced or the crop was grown or the farmers were treated. It has nothing to do with that. There are other standards that OECO-TEX, so there's OECO-TEX Green, there's OECO-TEX, I think OECO-TEX Green is I'd have to double check it because I don't really engage with it. I have yet to see or come across in any of my supplier avenues OECO-TEX Green or OECO-TEX Organic. It is all OECO-TEX Standard 100, which I don't really, it doesn't fit my criteria.
Yeah, and it doesn't really have any beneficial impact on the workers, does it?
No, or the environment. It has maybe a small effect on the human body that we're not ingesting or absorbing harmful chemicals into our clothes. But fabrics shouldn't have harmful chemicals in them in the first place. So yeah, there are some, and I'm very open about this, there are some compromises that I have had to make because there are no other alternatives.
Right, like what, for example?
So the interfacing, Vylene's range of interfacing, I've chosen to go with they're like there's ones that have a percentage of recycled polyester, so it's recycled polyester, and I try not to go down the recycled polyester or recycled cotton route, based on recycled cotton takes more energy to either one, break down the original cotton fibres to then reprocess it into, it's kind of a double process. So it's double the energy. Well, I don't know what the facts are, but like much more energy. But some people love it. I don't do dead stock. Fundamentally, I don't really agree with it. The main thing I don't agree with is that the businesses who are producing these fabrics are overproducing them. And it feels to me personally like a get out of jail free card when they were like, oh, but we can pass this on as dead stock. But often the dead stock fabrics they're not labelled. Yeah, you can do your little burn test. But there's no way to really, there's no paperwork with them in general. I mean, I'm sure that some people are managed to get to the bottom of it. But as a small business, you have such a small voice.
But also there are other businesses doing that, isn't there?
Yeah.
And in terms of what you were saying about seeing a gap in the market, that's not a gap in the market in a sense, is it?
No, not for me anyway. The only way I would sell dead stock fabric is that if I can have the paperwork to go with it, and that it was as a fabric, it is organic or similarly traceable and certified by a standard. Going back to fabrics as well, there are some fabrics that are man-made cellulose but made from natural resources. So the things that like Tencel and Ecovero and Bemberg, these are all essentially sustainable viscoses. So they're made by companies who trademark the process. It's a man-made fabric made from natural resources, but it's done with like circular chemical processes and proper disposal and reforestation of crops. And so yeah, there's that as well. The other compromises I've made are on some haberdashery. So I do stock stuff from Clover, which does come in little plastic packaging. But personally, I find their haberdashery really, really, really good quality.
It's going to last a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the same pack of Clover pins that I bought at the Knitting and Stitching Show in Dublin when I was about, I'm going to say 21. So that was 13 years ago. I still have the same pack of pins and they're as sharp as anything. Do you know what I mean? So I try and buy things that I know that are going to last.
You buy it once and you've got it forever, and they might even get then handed down to somebody else eventually.
Yeah.
So in terms of all of that, like, do you find yourself having to kind of educate your customers or communicate that to customers, to kind of explain maybe like why you have some products when maybe they might be used to seeing something else, or, you know, why maybe some of the things that you are carrying are a bit more expensive than like an equivalent elsewhere, you know?
Yeah, it definitely, yes, but very few people do question it. I really do try and price the fabrics that is fair to what I'm buying them for and a suitable markup for me and my overheads. But often it's not what the markup, I try to keep it on par with that type of fabric and with other businesses. So I don't try and like undercut other businesses or excessively oversell and pretend it's something it's not. There's a balance to be struck with price point. Sometimes I kind of go into other fabric shops just to see what they're pricing their, cotton poplins that are genetically modified cotton. And it's not far off. And I just feel like maybe the bit like Bawn Textiles it has less of a profit margin, but I'm fine with that because I still don't want to exclude people from buying the right product. I don't want to be this exclusive. Yeah, I try not to overprice things, but I price them according to how little I can price them for. This business is never going to make me a millionaire, and I'm happy with, it's not, that's not the goal. The goal for me is not like money at all. It's about doing something nice, doing something for myself, doing something for my customers, providing a nice location, providing a nice service, and making it financially viable, of course, so that it can sustain itself, but it's not this big profit moving entity at all.
So in terms of sourcing, like, when you're such a small business, like you've presumably there are minimums. Do you find that difficult to kind of meet the minimums to have a decent turnover and not be sitting on loads of stock that is then costing you a lot of money?
I tend to, I try really hard to build relationships with the suppliers that are open to having a small minimum order quantity.
Right.
And when I say small, I mean 20 to 30 meters. So I wouldn't buy less than 20 meters, but I wouldn't generally buy more than 30 unless they were like, look, we've got a roll that's 32, 35 meters. Would you take that? And if it's a black linen, then I'm like, yeah, I know that'll sell really, like
Yeah.
it depends on the fabric.
Yeah, if it's a wild print, maybe not.
Yeah, no. And actually, going back to print and going back to your previous question, some people come in, they're like, oh, I'm looking for, something with a big pattern on it. And actually, it's a choice of mine to not stock prints.
Right.
I stock pattern that is woven into the fabric. So I've got one fabric that has the stripe is knitted into the sweatshirt fleece, and the others are gingham. So the threads are woven into the gingham pattern.
Yeah. So why did you choose that? Was that a personal aesthetic, or you thought just in terms of like, longevity and
It's definitely both. So it's that I don't wear pattern fabric. So no shade. I used to work for Cath Kitson in my student days.
oh wow. All
I've completed pattern. I've completed it. I've conquered. I've conquered pattern. I used to go home and just see like polka dots and floral sprigs all over my ceiling. I was like, well, I'm done. And I think that was the end of pattern for me. Yeah, so I'm done. So aesthetically, I don't love it.
Out of interest, was everybody else who worked there also just wearing solids?
No, so we had to wear pattern.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we had to wear some fabrics from Cath Kitson. We were given like a staff uniform
Right.
allowance, or something like a polka dotty blouse or something. Yeah, we had to wear fabric that was, in keeping with the brand. But the other reason why I don't stock pattern is, like you said, the longevity is it's much harder to if you've made I always use the kind of leopard print we all know leopard print. So I mean, I like leopard print. I have leopard print shoes. They're great. Doc Martens, they're the love of my life. But if I made a leopard print top, for example, and then I wore it for a couple of months and I thought, oh, look, this doesn't really go with my wardrobe anymore, and I'd like to pass this on. Well, how many other people want to wear a leopard print top? So I think you narrow down the field of people you can pass things on to. But if you made a green top, just a plain green top, or a plain black top, or a plain red top, there are far more people in the world that will wear a block colour because it's a safer option, or that's just my view.
Yeah. I often think about that in terms of like dungarees or a boiler suit. Like if you made like a pair of black denim dungarees, you could wear that 7 times in a month and with a different top. No one would not that you have to try and look different all the time, but you're not going to get bored of that quickly because it's so versatile. Whereas if you made,
it goes with everything.
Yeah. Whereas if you made like maybe a railroad denim pair of dungarees, do you know what I mean? Like that's it's not so mix and matchable with the rest of your wardrobe. Also, you're probably going to be like, oh, you're the person that wears the railroad dungarees.
Yeah, I saw you. Yeah, I know.
I saw you wearing those dungarees.
And it was really evident. So I've run this event. So I've run a secondhand or like circular secondhand September event 3 times now.
Oh, tell me about that.
So it was just a nice way to kind of circulate handmade garments.
So this is in the flesh?
In the flesh. So I've noticed that a lot of charities don't take secondhand clothing because they don't come with a care label. And I can understand that is for their legalities, it makes sense for them. And especially when it comes to children's clothes, there's just like the vulnerability of not knowing what's in the garment. So a lot of people who hand make their own clothes kind of struggle to pass them on if it's not within like immediate like friend groups or local sewing groups. And also the popularity of vintage and Depop, I think people who don't make their own clothes don't realize the value and the time and the effort and the cost that goes into handmade clothes. And I think people devalue, just as a generalization, there's the potential to be like, oh, but it's handmade, so it's surely no more than a tenner's worth. And you're like, that is where you're wrong, my friend. So that's why I set up this secondhand circular sale so that makers all over the country, they can send their stuff by post or drop it in person. And I think I've got a capacity of about 200 garments. I've got 4 rails, but it's a great event because then I don't know what's coming in the door. There's a real buzz about the place. But I did notice a lot of the fabrics that people are not wanting and wanting to pass on, 90% of them are pattern fabrics.
Oh, interesting.
It kind of reaffirmed my, like, we're all attracted to pattern fabrics in a way that, like, oh, isn't that beautiful? It's quite striking. I really spotted that from across the room. But do you want to wear it on Monday morning? And do you want to wear it again on Tuesday? And I like going back to your dungarees. I will happily wear the same outfit 2-3 days in a row with kind of fresh under, I've wear like a long sleeve top under and whatever. It does not bother me. It is normal. I actually have a very small wardrobe because what I make and what I wear, I really, really love. And I mean, I wore the same dress to 3 weddings this year. I have no problem doing that, because I'm happy in the garment. I feel good. Yeah, it's just kind of a mindset thing for me. And I totally recognize that not everyone feels that way.
But just to wrap up about your secondhand sale,
Yeah.
of the Me Made. So what happens with the money? Like, do the people that donated, they get the money?
Yeah, so the shop takes a small commission based on the fact that it's a good bit of admin, and
Sure.
I try and like steam everything, and I'm in for like 2 late nights beforehand, and I'm trying to keep track of who owns what and labeling everything. So there is a spreadsheet that goes with it, and obviously the after admin.
Are you setting the prices?
No, whoever makes the garment is setting the price. Happy
Right.
to give them some advice as to, oh well, somebody else made a similar, but it depends on what people are happy to part with it for. It's a bit like vintage. Put a price on it, and somebody will want it, or somebody won't want it, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
And what happens with the items that don't sell? Do you then have to return them?
So there's an option in the kind of submission pack where people can either happily take them back. So there's that option. But if you don't want them, whatever's not sold, they can tick a box to say that I can donate it to Refugee on their behalf. And Refugee are an amazing Glasgow-based charity that support refugees and displaced people in the city, and they do care packages, and they have an amazing space in the city centre where families can go for their lunch and have playtime, where a mum or a family can go into the kind of shop part and pick out what they need. Like, they may have fled their country with nothing, or women fleeing domestic violence with 4 children and have left with whatever they had in their back. So there's like they're always looking for donations, and particularly donations for toiletries and like winter coats and shoes, and shoes in sizes for men. They'll put some call outs going, look, we've got 3 men that really need shoes, and then the Glasgow really responds, which is great.
Amazing.
And then some people can opt to donate the profits that they've made from their sales to Refugee as well.
Oh, amazing.
But often, and I don't judge it, but people often be like, oh, well, I'll use that money to buy my next sewing project.
It's a self-funding thing.
Yeah. Somebody did suggest it, like, oh, why don't you give them back vouchers for the shop? And I was like, no, it's their money. They choose where they want to spend it.
Yeah.
It's not.
If they want to spend it here, then that's fine.
Absolutely. It's totally fine.
So do you stock any products that are 100% like Scottish or British or Irish?
Do I hate to say, other than haberdashery, there's a lot of haberdashery that's like locally or nationally made.
Oh, cool. Like what?
So we've got the pegboards and tailor's clappers and point turners from Thread Pegs, which was Laura. She's based in Cornwall. We've got Generates, who was on the Sewing Bee a couple of years ago. We've got all
she's
her
local to you, isn't she?
bits and bobs. She is. We go for lovely chatty coffees.
Oh, amazing.
And she's great because she also helps out in the shop when I need a little bit of cover, and customers absolutely love her, and they come in and
I bet they
fangirl her.
do.
It's great. And Ailsa, who was on the recent Sewing Bee, Ailsa just lives around the corner from the shop too, so she pops in, and so that's nice. It's just lovely. And then when customers are in, they're like, oh my God, is that her? And you're like, yes. She's a pal. Second Cashmere are a lovely local company who repurpose and recondition cashmere garments, and whatever they can't recondition, they turn it into other things like lovely hats, hot water bottle covers. But they also, a big part of their business is mending. So what I stock from them is their mending yarn. So they unravel cashmere jumpers that are kind of beyond repair, and they can stock little
Like
I
little
don't
mini
know,
schemes.
little wraps of mending yarns from them, and they also do workshops in the shop, so darning and Swiss darning and mending workshops in the shop. So yeah, I recently started stocking yarn, and so I started stocking woolen flour. So Jules is an amazing, very established natural dyer of yarn in the Glasgow city centre. Who I met Jules years ago when I ran the Kickstarter for the shop, and she was really supportive, and she provided stuff for the goodie bags and things like that. So we've got a lovely relationship. So I've just recently started stocking her yarns as well. And what's really lovely is that there's some products that just walk in the door with the person. Obviously, most things get posted and shipped, but it is extra special when you've got people who are within walking distance or cycling distance of the shop who come in to deliver their wares personally. There's nothing like it.
Amazing. So in terms of like your in-person business and your bricks and mortar shop and your online shop, are there
Yeah.
some products that sell better online, some products that sell better in the flesh?
I think because I started the shop online and then opened the shop, but quite surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, 3/4 of the business sales still walk through the door. So only a quarter of my sales go online. But I think that's also because people do like to shop in person, and a lot of customers who aren't near Bawn Textiles will probably shop with their local fabric shop. But it's really nice to see people traveling, especially to the shop. You get a sense of, oh, I've maybe not seen them before. So I'll be like, oh, if you travel far, and they're like, oh, we've come for a weekend from Aberdeen. Or I remember there was a girl last year who absolutely pegged it into the shop out of breath at like 3:30 on a Sunday afternoon. And she's like, I've just got off the train from Brighton, but I'm only here till Wednesday and you're back open on Thursday. So I had to come in. And she subsequently is now living in Glasgow, and she's gone to the Glasgow School of Art. But I just remembered like, wow, somebody really pegged it off the train to get here for 20 minutes of her time.
How close are you from the station?
Not very close. She got a taxi. So it's really nice. Yeah. So people do kind of come to Glasgow on little weekend trips, and they fit in the shop. And people from the States and Canada have done that. They're like, oh, we've been following you online and we came to Scotland. And this year there was another lady from the States who was coming over for, I think, the Golf Open in St Andrews, and really wanted a copy of the Anne Ringstrand book, because the shipping of that particular book is quite expensive from Sweden to the States. And so while she was in the UK, she was like, oh, and she couldn't make it to Glasgow. She was like, can you post this to my hotel? And I was like, yeah, of course I can.
Oh, amazing.
But yeah, so it's lovely when people make the extra trip or effort to come into the shop and experience the shop. Even though it's tiny, it's lovely to be surrounded by the shop. And I do my best to kind of have the layout of the website really clear, but it's not quite the same. You can't just open the page and see everything on the screen, and you can't get a sense of the atmosphere. And I think the music that I play in the shop, some people compliment the music because it's I just pick it's a big long playlist, which I think is publicly accessible on
Spotify. Can you send me the link and then I'll put it in the show notes?
Yeah, it's quite nice. I mean, it's like, I don't know, like 6 days of music at this point. Or just the furniture. I think people compliment the furniture a lot. And that was a big part of the Kickstarter in February 2021, before the shop opened. The community really supported the vision of the shop, and the furniture was all handmade by local cabinet makers in Govan in Glasgow. And actually, Arne, who kind of led the making of the plywood furniture, his wife Maria, it's funny how things come around in circles. His wife Maria goes by Wild Knits Glasgow, so she's a gorgeous knitting pattern designer. And this Saturday, so I don't know when this podcast is going to go out, but Saturday the 12th of October, she's releasing a gorgeous hat pattern, or 2 hat patterns in various sizes. And on Sunday the 13th of October, we're having a little coffee morning to start off your knits, because the pattern is for refugee again. So knitting hats for refugee to hand out in their packs for people who need them. For people who don't know Glasgow, and I obviously didn't know Glasgow before I moved here at all, everyone says Glasgow's a village. I mean, it's a fairly sprawled city, but it is such a village. Everyone is connected. It is, I mean, I'm from Dublin originally, and I've never And I lived in London, I lived in Norfolk for a while. I've never lived in a place. There's just such a creative community that encapsulates just your daily life. I don't know, it's great. And every city has its good and bad bits, and it's got its areas that are not so pretty. And even the area around the shop is a real melting pot of good and bad. But I love the place. I absolutely love the place. So come to Glasgow.
I will. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!